So when people first meet me and they find out that I love trains and that I spent my childhood growing up in Japan, their first question is usually about the Shinkansen. That makes total sense. The Shinkansen is an absolute icon. The Japanese invented high-speed trains as we know them today, and it's still the very best high-speed network in the world, if you ask me. Trains run every few minutes, and with 0 fatalities, it has a flawless safety record. I've been on the Shinkansen a handful of times as a kid, but it wasn't very often. I was much more passionate about all the subways and commuter trains. That was the stuff that I rode every day. Transit systems are woven into the fabric of our cities, and I think that's why to this day I love exploring them and featuring them on the channel. Few cities can boast a transit system as dense and efficient as Tokyo. Trains carry millions of people to every corner of the city every day. Though their tracks may be next to the high-speed tracks, the trains themselves are worlds apart. The Shinkansen gives you a comfortable seat, one you often have to reserve. It whisks you to other cities at speeds of up to 320 kilometers per hour. For local trains, capacity is the name of the game. The population density in Japan's cities means that stops are close together and the trains are crowded. Japanese commuter trains have relatively low average speeds. The interior of these trains generally looks like this. Many doors on both sides to shorten the time trains spend at stations, and benches that face the aisle to maximize standing space. It's efficient, but it's not necessarily comfortable. So what if you're traveling a distance that's too far to comfortably take on a commuter train, but too close to ride a bullet train? Luckily, the railways have an answer for that: the Limited Express. Decades before the first Shinkansen ran in 1964, the Limited Express was a dominant force on the Japanese railways. The very first one ran in 1906, connecting Tokyo with the city of Kobe, some 590 kilometers away. More and more services were introduced in the years following. These were the main way that people traveled between cities. There were daytime trains as well as overnight services. The high-speed train basically made the sleeper train obsolete, and so unfortunately today there's only one regularly scheduled overnight train left. Yet the high-speed train did not wipe out the regular daytime Limited Express. Today, they fill the gap between commuter trains and high-speed trains. They travel to destinations that are not connected to the Shinkansen network, and while they share tracks with the slower commuter trains, they offer passengers a more comfortable, faster alternative. They achieve this in 2 ways: different trains and limited stops. I just described what the average interior design of a Japanese commuter train is like, but the Limited Express looks very different. There are only a few doors and the seats face forward in the direction of travel. The seats are well padded and feature multiple amenities. All in all, they are much more like the long-distance trains in Europe or North America. Because the interiors are so radically different, companies usually have a separate fleet of trains for their Limited Express service, completely different from their commuter fleet. Now let's talk about stopping patterns. This is the timetable of the Metro Union Pacific Northwest line in Chicago, and this is the timetable of Amtrak Northeast Regional Service. Looking at these schedules, we see that there is no clear pattern for which trains stop where. To make sure your train will stop at your destination, you need to find that specific train on the timetable and check to see if it actually serves that stop. Now, having express services is not a bad thing. It's good actually, speeding up journeys and dividing up capacity in a smart way. But when each train has its own station stops, it can act as a barrier for the less frequent users of a system. Predetermined stopping patterns organize this chaos to make it easier to use. This is a map of the Seibu Ikebukuro line in northwest Tokyo, which happens to be my favorite railway line. This line sees hundreds of departures a day, and there are many different stopping patterns. However, each stopping pattern is given a name and a color. For example, on this map, regular express trains are given the color orange. As a passenger, rather than searching through a timetable for my specific train to see if it will stop at my station, I just need to find the color orange on the map. Since all trains marked express will stop at the same places, I can be confident that this one will be no different. The best example I can find of this in the US is the Caltrain commuter rail in San Francisco. The local services, as well as the limited services, are given the letter L with a number. The number corresponds to what stations the train will stop at. The fastest service, called the Baby Bullet, gets the designation B7. Let's say that you commute to Menlo Park. You know that any train marked L1 and L3 or L5 will stop there, but you also know that you can't get on a B7 train. Unfortunately, Caltrain only shows these numbers on their printed timetables and not on the departure screens, but still, you can see how a system like this is easier to use. Let's go back to the Seibu Ikebukuro line now. All these colors are different express variations used by regular commuter trains. All the way at the top, however, we see the color red, which stands for Limited Express. Notice that it skips a lot of stops. By serving only the major destinations along a line, it acts as the premium service on that line. These services normally also have their own name, whereas regular commuter trains don't. The name can be based on its destination, or on something or someone famous along the way. If you think about it, this is usually true in Europe and the US as well. Commuter trains and regional trains usually don't get their own name, while Amtrak services and some of the Eurocity trains do. Comfortable trains with few stops. All these luxuries can be yours, for a price. Passengers pay a surcharge to be able to ride the limited express trains. You pay for the basic fare of the distance you travel, but then you also have to pay for a separate limited express fee on top of your ticket. If you reserve a seat, there's usually an extra reservation fee on top of that. If you are a tourist traveling in Japan, you can use your Japan Rail Pass on any of the limited express trains run by the JR companies for no extra cost. If you don't reserve a seat, you can just get on, and if you do want a reservation, you can use your rail pass to get one for no extra charge. However, the interesting thing about Japan is that there are dozens and dozens of private railway companies that offer train service as well. Many of these companies also run their own limited express trains. Of course, to ride these, you will need to pay all associated costs since the Japanese rail pass is not valid on them. Basically, limited express trains serve two main market groups. On the one hand, there are the super commuters, people who commute long distances and are willing to dish out a little extra money to avoid the crowds. And then there are trains geared towards tourists. They connect major cities with popular tourist destinations, whether they be beaches, mountains, or cultural heritage sites. Now that I've explained what a limited express is, let's use an example from the US to reinforce this. Let's go back to the Caltrain example from earlier. Their fastest train is the Baby Bullet, which stops very little. Imagine if Caltrain required you to buy a small extra fee on top of the regular fare to ride this. Now imagine that they used a special kind of train that they don't use for any of their slower services. That train would be a limited express. By the way, if you want to see a video of me riding Caltrain's Baby Bullet service, subscribe to Trains Are Awesome. You won't be disappointed. Or honestly, you could consider the Acela a type of limited express. It runs on the same route as the Northeast Regional, but stops less and charges higher fares for higher comfort. For Japanese railway companies, limited express trains are usually their flagship trains. A lot of attention is put into the design of these trains, so here are a few of my favorites. The La View is operated by the Seibu Railway. It connects downtown Tokyo with the mountains and flower fields in the city of Chichibu. Its round shape, plain metal exterior, and large windows were designed to have the train blend in with its surroundings. Spasha is operated by the Tobu Railway. It connects different stations in Tokyo with the popular tourist city of Nikko. I don't know, it's old, it's gold, I just remember really liking this train as a kid. The Romance Car is another iconic train. Operated by the Odakyu Railway, it connects Shinjuku, the world's busiest station, with the Hakone National Park near Mount Fuji. The driver sits in the top floor, allowing passengers to sit behind the front window and take in the panoramic views. I think the Azusa, operated by JR East, has one of the coolest designs of any train. It was designed by Ken Okuyama, a designer who has designed cars for Porsche and Ferrari. The front of this train looks like a futuristic robot. Speaking of robot-looking trains, this is the Rapide. It is owned by the Nankai Railway and connects downtown Osaka with the airport. Straight out of a sci-fi cartoon. Finally, we have the Sunrise Express. Though the beige and maroon are certainly a choice, this train is cool because it's the last remaining sleeper train in Japan. There are a variety of sleeping accommodations for all sorts of budgets. If you want to see a great review of the Sunrise Express, my friend Nonstop Eurotrip has that video up on his channel, so you should definitely watch that. Now this would be a great place to end the video, and I would love to do that. Unfortunately, however, we have to acknowledge those pesky little exceptions. A few railway companies run regular commuter trains, but call them limited express. While these usually are still the fastest service, they will just use regular stock and will not require a surcharge. So how will you know whether you need an extra ticket or not? The best thing to do is to research before you go. If you are taking a JR train, you will need a limited express ticket. As for the other railway companies, it depends on the company. However, at stations with limited express service, there will always be plenty of signs, announcements, and kiosks indicating that you need to buy a separate ticket. Knowing in advance what line you're riding helps, and as always, if you're not sure, ask station staff. Or send me a message on the Trains Are Awesome Instagram. I love interacting with you all on there. Thanks for watching today. The Limited Express is a great product that can make your experience on the Japanese railways even better than it already is. Would you want to see something similar where you live? What would be your ideal corridor for a premium service? As always, let me know in the comments. See you next time.